In today's video, I'm going to talk about how you can use a drum track to trigger through MIDI different instruments. So I was watching a video by Marlo Diggs, link in the description, about the new MPC software, and he talks about how you can route MIDI from one track to another track. And that got me thinking, you can probably do this in Ableton as well. I think it's an interesting idea to use a drum track or particular sounds within a drum track to trigger other instruments. So instead of writing MIDI for all the different instruments, you can trigger instruments from another instrument, basically. I recently also made a video about MIDI tools in Ableton, so if you haven't seen that one, go check it out, because today we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the MIDI tools and MIDI routing in Ableton, so let's get started. So what I first did is I created a simple drum pattern that sounds like this. It's very basic. It's one MIDI track with a drum rack with a bunch of sounds. So there's a kick, a snare, and two different hi-hats. So nothing special going on here. And then I found a sample from the band Deus. The track's called Bad Timing, also linked in the description. And I loaded up 2 instances of sampler to put the sample in. So here on track 2 and 3, as you can see, there's a sampler instance with the sample from the song called Bad Timing. On track 2 here, I changed the start point to a bit later in the sample, and then here on track 3, it's at the beginning of the sample. The first one I also pitched down, so I set the root note to C4, so if you actually play a C3, it is pitched down 1 octave. So far nothing special. So instead of using the MIDI clip to put notes in, I want to trigger the sample on track 2 and also the sample on track 3 by one of the drum sounds. So if you go to input here, select drum rack, that's the first track, and then select one of the drum sounds. So as you can see, all of them are listed here that I've used. And then you can choose between pre-effects and post-effects. I choose pre-effects, and so what it means is now for track 2, the kick drum triggers the sample. So every time there's a kick drum, you hear the sample, and it sounds like this. You can also mute the drums because the MIDI is still sent, even though we can't hear the drums. So as you can hear, is the MIDI note of the kick drum triggers on channel 2 the sampler, and the same with the snare. So the snare is snare 23 pre-effects triggering channel 3 the sampler. So when I enable that, and then with the drums. So this is a pretty cool way to chop a sample by simply having a drum beat that can trigger the different samples on different channels. You can also just do one long sample that's every time it's triggered when you hear a kick drum, for instance. So you can get really creative with this and create interesting chopping results. So once I had this, I thought, let's continue, use some of the other sounds as well to create, to trigger other sounds. So the next step was to use the hi-hat, which is every 8th note, and direct that to another channel where I have a drift synthesizer, and I created a kind of shaker type of sound. So that sounds like this, without the drums. Basically the drift synthesizer without the oscillators and just some noise. Filtered with an EQ, added an auto pan. And then with the drums it sounds like this. So it's very basic and it's kind of the same all the time. So what I did is I went to the MIDI tools, MIDI effects, and there's a whole list of different options you can use. So I use the note length. So you can change the length of the MIDI note, and it's modulated with an LFO. So then you create this. So in this way you create a varying note length, and that makes the sound much more dynamic. So now with the drums. So now we have 2 samples and we have a noise shaker type of sound. Let's add a bass line to this beat, and we want the bass to be triggered by the kick drum. Here I have an operator, which is basically a sine wave. it is triggered by the kick. So it sounds like this. And with the drums. As you can see, I added a MIDI monitor here on the channel so you can see the incoming note. And as you can see, it's a C3, so that's way too high for a bass note. We want to be in the C1 octave. So again, if you go to MIDI effects, there is the pitch device and you can pitch down the note. So I put it on -20, so you get an E1. And then together with the drums. So now we have a bass line that kind of works. And then I wanted to add one more sound to this beat by using the second hi-hat that's together with the snare to trigger another sound. So here on track number 6, I have a drum sampler with a conga 808 sample in it. That's triggered by the hi-hat, the second hi-hat that, as you can see, is together with the snare. So that sounds like this. And it only appears once in every bar. And to spice this up, I added the note echo from the MIDI effect. So it's basically an echo. So instead of having a delay where you actually delay the sound, I'm gonna have a note echo, like a MIDI device that delays the MIDI note. You have the parameters for the time, the delay, and the amount of feedback. So I put it on 2, delay on 40% and feedback on 10%, and it sounds like this. And then together with the beat. And then of course, I used only one MIDI effect on some of the channels, but you can combine them. So you can also have a pitch and an echo, and then you can also modulate the note length. So you can create very complex sort of MIDI transformations on incoming MIDI for that instrument. Okay, let's now hear the end result of this beat. And just for the example, every instrument is triggered by the drums in this video. Of course, you don't have to do that. You can just use only trigger the sample by the drums, and then the rest of the synths and bass instruments, you can just use the MIDI in Ableton. But this was just for the demonstration purpose to show you that you can do a lot by MIDI triggering instruments from another instrument, or in this case, a drum beat. So hopefully this was inspiring. Let me know if you use this technique already, how you use it, what kind of clever ways you came up with of using the MIDI effects. Keep making music. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.